This week, we're going to talk about financial management. College is obviously a huge expense and can be extremely difficult if you don't qualify for financial aid, or you're also trying to make ends meet and you have other bills to pay. And so we're going to look at some ways that you can maybe save some money and be responsible with your expenses both before and after college. So the first thing we want to look at is the types of money that you have coming in. So that could include things like work, scholarships, any grants or financial aid money that you have coming in, any money that you have coming in from any sources. And then we can also look at the money going out. So that would include things like transportation expenses, food, things like your phone bill, internet, if you have any credit cards. And so hopefully we always have more money coming in than we do going out. So if that's not the case, we can look at a couple of ways that you could maybe increase your income. So maybe you could find a job or a better paying job if you already are working. Maybe one that would better fit around your hours at school. We do have some student worker positions for students who qualify for financial aid. So you can look at getting a job here at the college where maybe you could maybe be a gym attendant and work around your college course hours. Always make sure that you fill out your FAFSA form every single year for financial aid. Even if you're living at home with mom and dad and you don't think that you're going to be eligible, a lot of times even for scholarships and other forms of financial aid opportunities, you have to have that form filled out in order to be eligible at all. So you'd be surprised too. It's not necessarily, if you have a decent income, you may still qualify for at least some financial aid. So it always pays to fill out that FAFSA form. You can also seek out scholarships. There are lots of websites like FastWeb or scholarships.com where you can look for scholarships. Also, don't be afraid to look around in your community for scholarships. Sometimes if you belong to a credit union, the credit union may have a scholarship. Depending on where your parents work, that might be an option for a scholarship. Sometimes they're based on ethnicity, or maybe if you had a relative who, was in the Vietnam War or something like that. So there are always, criteria for scholarships. And so you never know until you actually go and fill out at a place like FastWeb or Scholarships to know which ones you might qualify for. And then we always have the option, if necessary, to take student loans. And I say if necessary because I've heard lots of horror stories about people who, it's very tempting. The check comes in the mail and it says it's for $7,250. And you think to yourself, wow, all of the things that I could buy for $7,250. But you've got to pay that money back. And so you want to make sure that you're not taking student loans if you don't need them for school. Okay, it might be nice to have an updated car or some new furniture, but again, if you look at the rates for those items, you're probably going to end up paying more in the long run for those things. So just be very careful. It's not to say you shouldn't take student loans, but you should only take them if they're absolutely necessary. So then there are some ways that you can also decrease some expenses. You can shop around for like your car insurance, cell phone plans, cable TV options. A lot of people now are switching over to, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu instead of expensive cable bills. You can always try to downgrade a plan for your cell phone, shop around to get a better option. Same thing for car insurances. It doesn't hurt to go and get some additional quotes. You may find that you could save a couple $100 a year or more if you shop around for those things. Be sure you pay off any high interest credit cards. Most credit cards these days have like astronomical interest rates. So you end up paying more on interest than the actual principal on the card itself. And so allowing those credit cards to kind of continuously stack up makes it harder and harder to get out of that debt because of the high interest rates. Another thing is that try not to go out to eat as often, especially when you're in school and you're trying to manage a budget. Going out to eat, even for a simple lunch or grabbing something at the gas station on the way to work or school, those costs all add up over time. So try to, I pack my lunch every day. I encourage students to pack their lunches. We have microwaves on the campuses. If you can pack lunch to go to work, if they have a refrigerator and a microwave, that can save a lot of money. You can also, even with friends, instead of going out, have a fun party at your place, cooking in instead, and where everybody can kind of share and have fun making a meal together. Okay, you can also look around for coupons or even some discount stores where you might be able to get something that you need or want for significantly less money than you would in a regular store. Okay, next I want to talk about a little bit about a crash course in vocabulary for student loans. So if you decide that you have to take student loans, you want to know a little bit of the terminology so that you're aware of what you're getting into. There are two different types of loans, subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So with a subsidized loan, the government will pay the interest. So you get the loan in your first year of college and you continue to go through for 2 or 4 years. And the entire time, the government is going to pay the interest on that loan. So by the time you get out of college, whatever the value of the loan was, let's say $2,500, you only owe $2,500 for that loan. And you will begin to make payments then afterwards to begin repaying that loan. With an unsubsidized loan, the interest will accrue or add up while you're in school. So if you borrowed in your first year of college $2,500 and it was an unsubsidized loan, by the time you get out of school and you start to repay that loan may now actually cost $2,700, let's say, because there was $200 worth of interest that accrued on it while you were in school. So obviously, if you, at all possible, you always want to take the subsidized loan over the unsubsidized one. Then speaking of that interest, there are two different types of interest for any loans that you take. Those would be fixed versus floating. So fixed, I always know it might say that it's 4.5% interest rate. And so I'll know that, over time, that 4.5% is the continuous interest rate on that loan. Floating interest rates depend on what's happening with the feds and like federal interest rates. So if the interest rates go up, the interest on your loans will go up. If the interest at the federal level, at the Federal Reserve level goes down, then the interest would go down. And ideally, a fixed interest rate is more stable than a floating one, because you simply, with floating, you're sort of making a gamble on what the economy may or may not be like. So at least with a fixed interest rate, you always know that you're paying the consistent amount. Then you have the option of federal versus private loans. You always, always, always want to take the federal loans before you accept a private loan. Private loans tend to have far higher interest rates than federal loans. So again, always a reason to fill out your FAFSA form and find out what you're eligible for in the way of federal loans before you would go searching out any sort of private opportunities. And lastly, sometimes with student loans, especially if you're a younger student in school, now this wouldn't apply if you're an older student who's been out of high school for a while, maybe you live on your own, but a lot of times they want, especially if you don't have much credit established or something, they'll ask you to have a cosigner sign onto your loans. And so oftentimes that might be your mother or your father. Just a warning, cosigners beware for those individuals who co-sign student loans with their students, with their children. You're on the hook for those. The cosigner is on the hook for those. So if anything were to happen to you, your cosigner is on the hook for that loan. So, anything, obviously I certainly would not wish anything bad upon anybody, but things happen. What happens if you were somehow in an accident and could no longer finish school or whatever? You and the cosigner are still on the hook for that loan. So again, it's just one of those things to be cautious about. So just a few things, again, not to totally scare you away from student loans, but a couple of tips. If you have to take out student loans, have a plan from the day that you accept those student loans to figure out how you're going to repay them. So you should already be thinking about the day that you're out of school. 6 months after school is when they will start to ask you to repay your student loans. You should already have a plan on how that's going to fit into your budget at that time. And never take more than your anticipated first-year salary in your career field. So if you go to the Occupational Outlook Handbook provided by the federal government, and it says that an average first-year salary for your particular career field is $34,000, I would not recommend taking any more than $34,000 in student loans. And one final quick tip about BankMobile cards. I think this is the brand of card that Hack is now using for going back, like to giving you your refunds if you are owed any monies. And a lot of times what the college wants to do is, rather than give you a check for that written amount, they'll give you this credit card that basically has the remainder of your balance that is owed to you, and then you can use that from here on. Just a word of caution though, that if you lose that card, there's usually like a $10 or $15 charge for it. And if you leave college and there's still a balance on that card and you're no longer a student, they will continue to charge you approximately $5 a month until there's nothing left on that card. So again, you just want to be really careful that you're not losing money by utilizing one of the BankMobile cards that the college likes to use. So aside from your own expenditures, the other thing I would just recommend to you is just to think about how student loan debt in and of itself is impacting our country. So I have a link to the student loan debt clock, and let me find here. So I have a link to, this is what's called the student loan debt clock, and this clock is actually showing the amount of student loan monies that have been borrowed by all Americans. So we now currently owe over $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. As you can see from this website, it actually exceeded credit card debt in June of 2010. So more Americans owe in student loan debt than any other kind of debt in this country. So, and again, and most of this goes in the way of federal loans that were borrowed. You know, this is borrowed against the government. So if people can't repay their student loans, or they're not repaying their student loans, how do you think that impacts our country as a whole, our government, our economy, and just how, you know, those of us who maybe are paying student loans are maybe ending up paying the price, like taxpayers are paying the price for people who cannot repay their student debt. So again, aside from your personal issues with whether or not to take student loans and how to pay them back, student loans are impacting you already, whether you've ever taken a student loan out or not.